There is a test running right now in your life, and the unusual thing about it is that you didn't sign up for it, you weren't warned about it, and the answers have nothing to do with what you know. They have everything to do with how honestly you can see yourself. Most tests in life arrive with visible stakes, a decision with consequences, a conversation with a clear outcome, a moment where you understand, even in real time, that something significant is being determined. But the kind of test Mercury retrograde administers doesn't announce itself. It arrives disguised as ordinary experience, a message that lands in your inbox, a name that surfaces unexpectedly, a feeling about a situation you thought you'd made your peace with. You encounter it, and your first instinct is to react the way you always have, and that reaction, more than anything else, is precisely what's being examined. Right now, with Mercury still moving in retrograde and the Pisces new moon building its energy toward March 19th, the tests arriving in people's lives are particularly well crafted. They're arriving in the exact form most likely to bypass your defenses, in the shape of something familiar, something you've seen before, something you thought you already knew how to handle. And that familiarity is the whole trap and the whole invitation. What is being tested right now is whether you've actually changed or whether you've simply gotten better at managing the parts of yourself that haven't. Mercury retrograde has a very specific mechanism, and understanding it changes how you interpret everything that has been happening around you. When Mercury appears to reverse its direction in the sky, the energy it governs, communication, information, timing, the movement of messages and meaning between people, begins operating with a kind of backflow. Things move in reverse. Conversations that were closed reopen. People who are gone come back. Situations that seemed finished reveal themselves to still have chapters left unwritten. The forward momentum of your life slows enough that the things you passed too quickly on the way through come back into view. The reason this feels so disruptive is that most people are oriented entirely forward, toward the next plan, the next version of themselves, the next chapter. And Mercury retrograde doesn't care about any of that. It is interested in what you left behind, in the emotional and conversational and relational loose ends that the forward momentum of your life made it easy to walk away from without full resolution. And it returns them to you, not cruelly but insistently, with a patience that suggests it will keep returning them until you actually deal with them. And right now, with the Pisces new moon approaching on March 19th, the emotional depth available to you when you encounter these returning situations is significantly amplified. Pisces dissolves the usual armor. It softens the places you've trained yourself to keep hard. It makes you more porous, more feeling, more honestly in contact with what you actually think and want and need, as distinct from what you've told yourself you think and want and need. The combination of the retrograde's returning motion and the new moon's emotional depth means that the signals arriving in your life in these days are arriving with more clarity, more feeling, and more urgency than they would at almost any other point in the year. Which means the signals that have been appearing around you, the ones you may have been tempted to dismiss or explain away, deserve a second, much more careful look. The first signal that tends to appear during a Mercury retrograde of this particular depth is the return of someone you didn't expect to hear from. And it is almost never random. You know the experience. A name appears on your screen that you haven't seen in months, sometimes years. A message arrives that opens with something casual, a check-in, a memory, a reference to something you once shared, and yet something about its arrival feels anything but casual. You feel it land differently than it should if it were truly just a harmless hello. There is weight in it, history in it, something unresolved clinging to the edges of the ordinary words. The instinct in this moment is usually binary, either rush toward the reconnection with full openness, or protect yourself by keeping the response short and the door mostly closed. And both of those instincts, while understandable, are ways of avoiding the actual question that this signal is asking you to sit with before you respond at all. The question is not whether you want to reconnect with this person. The question is what the return of this connection is revealing to you about yourself right now. Because Mercury retrograde doesn't return people to your life simply to resume what was. It returns them to give you access to something you couldn't see clearly when the connection was active, about who you were in that dynamic, about what you were seeking, about what was left genuinely unresolved versus what was merely abandoned. The person showing up in your messages or your awareness is less the point than what their reappearance surfaces in you. If you feel relief when they appear, ask yourself honestly what you've been missing. If you feel dread, ask yourself what remains unsaid. If you feel nothing, ask yourself whether that nothing is genuine peace or very well-trained numbness. Because the answer to whichever of those questions applies to you is the signal. The person is the envelope. What you feel when they arrive is the letter inside it. And the most powerful response to this signal, before you reply, before you decide, before you do anything external at all, is simply to sit with what their return has stirred up. To let it tell you something about where you actually are, emotionally, with everything that connection represents. Because that information is yours regardless of what you choose to do with the connection itself. The retrograde returned this person to give you access to that information. Whether you pursue the reconnection or let it go, what you do with the self-knowledge it offers is entirely up to you. The second signal tends to arrive more quietly, and because of its quietness, it is the one most likely to be dismissed. It is the conversation that keeps replaying in your mind, a specific exchange from days or weeks or sometimes years ago that you have been unable to stop returning to. There is something compulsive about the way this kind of memory behaves during Mercury retrograde. You'll be in the middle of something completely unrelated, making coffee, driving, drifting towards sleep, and the conversation returns. And it returns in detail. Not as a vague general memory, but as something sharp and close, with the specific words and the specific tone and the specific feeling of the moment preserved with unusual fidelity. You remember what you said and what they said and the pause between one thing and the next. You remember how you felt and how they seemed to feel and the particular way the conversation ended or didn't quite end. The question this signal is asking you is one that the replaying itself keeps trying to answer. What is unfinished here? Because Mercury retrograde does not replay finished conversations. The mind does not loop through exchanges that have been fully processed and released. The repetition is the signal. The fact that this particular moment keeps finding you, keeps insisting on your attention across days and weeks, means there is something in it that has not yet been fully received. A truth you heard, but didn't let yourself absorb. A moment where you said what was easy rather than what was true. An exchange where something important was communicating itself beneath the surface of the actual words, and you registered it at the time without fully translating it. The wise response to this signal is to stop trying to resolve the loop by thinking your way through it. Replaying the conversation looking for the right interpretation, the satisfying explanation, the reasoning that finally makes it make sense. That approach will only extend the loop. The resolution lives in feeling rather than analysis. The question to sit with is not what was said, but what was felt. What emotion was present in you during that exchange that you did not fully allow at the time? What were you actually communicating that got lost in the translation into manageable, acceptable words? What were they actually communicating that you were not yet ready to receive? With the Pisces new moon approaching, your access to that emotional layer of the conversation is deeper right now than it has probably been since the exchange itself occurred. This is the window in which the thing the conversation was actually about, beneath the words that were exchanged, can finally become clear. And that clarity, once it arrives, has a way of releasing the loop. The replay stops when what it was carrying has finally been received. The third signal is in some ways the most subtle, and in other ways the hardest to ignore once you recognize it for what it is. It is the decision, or the plan, or the commitment that keeps feeling wrong even though nothing about it has visibly changed. You made a choice, maybe weeks ago, maybe longer, and at the time it made sense. All the reasoning aligned. The pros outweighed the cons. You moved forward with it feeling settled and clear. But at some point during this Mercury retrograde period, something in you quietly stopped being settled about it. The sense of rightness that the decision initially carried has been gradually replaced by a low-level resistance that you can feel but can't quite explain. When you think about following through on the plan, something in you hesitates. Maybe slightly, maybe considerably. But the hesitation is there, and it wasn't there before, and you don't know what to do with it. The temptation here is either to dismiss the hesitation as Mercury retrograde anxiety, to tell yourself that everything feels uncertain right now, and this is just the retrograde talking, or to immediately reverse course, to treat the discomfort as a definitive sign that the decision was wrong, and the only honest thing to do is undo it. Both of those responses are premature. What this signal is actually asking you to do is interrogate the hesitation with genuine curiosity, rather than with either defensiveness or panic. Because the hesitation is informative, but what it's informing you about may be different from what you assume. Sometimes the resistance you feel toward a decision during Mercury retrograde is the retrograde surfacing a genuine misalignment, something you couldn't see clearly before because you were moving too fast or too hopefully, or without access to information that has since arrived. In that case, the hesitation is protective. It is asking you to pause, to re-examine, to give yourself permission to choose differently before you've gone too far to change course. But sometimes the resistance is something older and less specific to the decision itself. Sometimes what Mercury retrograde surfaces through a decision's sudden instability is the general anxiety of someone who has been burned by forward motion before. Someone who learned, through experience, that things that feel good can fall apart, that commitments can be broken, that hope is a liability. And in that case, the hesitation belongs less to the specific decision than to a deeper pattern, a protective reflex that surfaces under the particular pressure of the retrograde and asks you to slow down, not because the decision is wrong, but because you are afraid that it might turn out to be. The difference between these two kinds of hesitation is only knowable through honest self-examination. And the Pisces new moon approaching on March 19th is, right now, one of the most powerful forces available for exactly that kind of examination. The deep emotional honesty that Pisces demands, the stripping away of the convenient story, the comfortable rationalization, the self-protective narrative, is fully available to you in this window. Use it to look at what the hesitation is actually made of. What is the fear beneath it? What is the hope beneath the fear? What is the truest part of you beneath all the management and the calculation actually want? That answer is the signal, and it is worth everything you have to be honest enough to receive it. These three signals, the unexpected return of a person, the replaying conversation, the decision that has lost its sense of rightness, are all arriving right now in the lives of people who are paying close enough attention. And what they share beneath their different surfaces is a single common thread. They are all asking you to look at something you have been relating to from a slight distance, something you've been managing rather than meeting, something you've been organizing your emotional life around without ever quite looking at directly. And the approaching Pisces new moon on March 19th is doing something very specific to the power of these signals in the days immediately preceding its arrival. The new moon in Pisces operates like a tide pulling back before a wave. Everything that has been submerged gets briefly exposed on the ocean floor of your emotional life before the next cycle begins. The things you've been carrying below the surface of your daily experience become, in these days before the new moon, unusually visible, unusually accessible, unusually available to your honest attention. Which means that the signals Mercury retrograde has been delivering are arriving right now at the exact moment when your capacity to actually receive them, to feel them fully and let them tell you what they're carrying, is at its peak for this entire cycle. The retrograde has been building toward this window. The new moon has been building toward this window. And you are inside it right now, in these days surrounding March 14th as the 19th approaches, living through the convergence of two forces that are both, in their different ways, trying to return you to something true. Here is the twist in this story, and it is the twist that changes how you understand everything that has been happening around you. The signals of Mercury retrograde are not problems delivered to your door. They are answers arriving in the form of questions. They look like disruptions, the unexpected message, the relentless mental replay, the sudden wobble in a settled plan. But what they actually are is the universe's method of delivering information that your forward-facing life was moving too fast to receive. The disruption is the delivery mechanism. The difficulty is the packaging. And inside each of these signals, inside the returning person and the looping conversation and the hesitating decision, is a specific piece of self-knowledge that belongs to the version of you that comes after this period. A version who knows something about their own patterns that this version is still learning. A version who has looked honestly at the things that keep recurring in their life. The same kinds of connections, the same kinds of conversations, the same kinds of decisions that eventually produce the same kinds of doubt, and has understood, from that honest looking, what it would take to actually do something different. Mercury retrograde is not interested in punishing you with these returns. It is interested in completing something, finishing a loop that has been running in the background of your life, consuming energy and attention that you don't even fully realize is being consumed. Every unresolved situation it surfaces is a loop that wants to be closed. Every signal it sends is a piece of information trying to find its way to the part of you that can actually use it. The Pisces new moon on March 19th is when the new cycle begins. But what you bring into that new cycle, what you have been willing to examine, to feel, to receive during this overlap of retrograde and new moon energy, is what determines the quality of the reset. A Pisces new moon can offer a profound and genuine emotional fresh start. The depth of that fresh start is directly proportional to the depth of the honesty you bring to what this period has been showing you. As March 19th approaches and Mercury prepares to station direct around March 20th, there are a few days remaining in this particular window. A few days in which the signals are still active, in which the emotional depth of Pisces is still available, in which the retrograde is still doing its returning, surfacing, completing work. The most valuable thing you can do with those days is deceptively simple. Pay attention to which of these three signals has been most present in your life. The returning person, the looping conversation, the hesitating decision. Whichever one has been insisting on your attention most consistently, that is your signal. That is the envelope the retrograde has been trying to hand you. And inside it is a piece of information about yourself that you are ready, finally, to receive. Receiving it doesn't require you to take dramatic action. The retrograde is winding down, and this is not the moment for sweeping changes or irreversible decisions. What it requires is honesty, a willingness to sit with the signal long enough to feel what it's carrying, beneath the surface of the obvious, beneath the first interpretation, beneath the comfortable explanation that lets you off the hook. The Pisces new moon will arrive, and the new cycle will begin. Mercury will station direct, and the forward motion of your life will resume. And when it does, you will carry something with you, either the weight of what you chose not to look at during this window, still unresolved, still waiting for the next retrograde to return it again, or the clarity of what you allowed yourself to see and feel and honestly receive. The version of yourself that crosses that threshold, having genuinely done this work, is lighter, more whole, moving forward with fewer loops running in the background, more available to what the new cycle is actually offering, because less of your energy is still tied to what the old cycle left unfinished. The retrograde is still active. The signals are still arriving. The window has not yet closed. If something has been recurring in your life over these past weeks, a person, a memory, a feeling of misalignment that won't resolve itself, consider the possibility that it is not a problem you're failing to solve. It is a signal you haven't yet fully received. And the most important thing you can do right now, in the remaining days before March 19th, is simply this: slow down enough to actually feel what it's pointing toward. The retrograde has been trying to return something to you. The Pisces new moon has been building the emotional depth to help you receive it. And you, somewhere beneath the noise of everything you're managing and everything you're carrying, already know what it is. The signal has been there the whole time, waiting, with the particular patience of things that know they will eventually be heard. Now is the time to listen.